I remember that night when my sister's loud voice broke out. "What's wrong?" I was watching TV in a stunning setting. "John, where are you? Help me." "What is wrong?" Anxious, as if there was an emergency. I jumped up quickly and asked, "What's wrong?" Her words echoed from the lavatory, tinged with astonishment. "I had forgotten my clothes. Can you go up to my room and get them for me?" My sister was a nice and compassionate woman, but she was quite forgetful. She had previously requested I purchase anything for her, but this time was different. I climbed up to my room. She looked for the clothes she had left and brought them down to the restroom. When I knocked, she opened the door somewhat wider than usual, frantically reaching out to collect the clothes. But in that little moment, the bathroom light gleamed on her pale skin, revealing every line of her body that I had not expected to see. I was bewildered and looked away quickly, but my heart was still beating and my eyes couldn't get away from the picture. Since that day, John, have felt a shift in my heart. She was still my sister and the closest person in the house, but the strange, haunting feeling from that moment lingered, leading me into a downward spiral of negative thoughts. I wasn't sure how to confront her or myself. My sister, and turned 24 this year. She is a stunning and confident woman who grabs the attention of everyone around her. She has a slim figure, a delicate face, and most importantly, an eye-catching waist that is difficult to ignore. With a liberal nature, she regularly wears form-fitting attire. Whether at home or out, those costumes appear to highlight all of her beauty, and whether intentional or not, they make my heart race every time I see them. My heart is altered since that night when I glimpsed her in the bathroom through the half-open door. The pale yellow light reflecting on her white skin and the sparkling water pouring down her contours made it unforgettable for me. I know such events should not have occurred and should not have lingered in my thoughts for so long, but that emotion, that preoccupation, like a ghost, haunts and never leaves. At first, I tried to convince myself that everything would pass and that the vision was just an unfortunate coincidence. But every night when I lay in bed, everything I saw that day came back to me vividly. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, cold perspiration running down my brow, trying to fight off the wrong thoughts that were entering my mind, but the more I struggled, the stronger those emotions were. Every day, like a fire that burned away my reason, she continued to live contentedly in our little home, completely unaware of the chaos that was unfolding inside me. She laughed and joked with me as usual, calling me with her familiar clear voice, which I used to think was normal, but now just looking at her sparkling eyes or smelling the lovely perfume she wore filled my heart with strange feelings. I couldn't tell you why I felt this way. All I knew was that I wasn't myself. Her tight clothes made things much more difficult when she sat on the sofa watching TV with her long legs crossed, or when she tied her hair up, revealing her long neck and bare shoulders. Every detail left me perplexed in a tangle of conflicting feelings. I felt humiliated, ashamed, and a vague longing that I couldn't deny. Yet, I attempted to present as calmly as possible. I talked and laughed with her as if nothing had happened. I helped her with minor household chores, talked to her about trivial issues, and occasionally mocked her. I wanted to see her smile, but underlying those conversations was an internal battle that I had no idea would resolve. I didn't dare to look into her eyes for too long, fearing she'd realize something was wrong with me. After a long day, I decided to relax in my room with an adult movie. It wasn't the first time I did this, but perhaps because of my unstable mood and recent jumbled thoughts, everything seemed more enticing than usual. After watching, I lay on the bed in a daze, unable to shake the images and feelings that persisted in my mind until a quick rap on the door jolted me back to reality. "John, come out here with me for a little while and go get some vegetables for dinner." Her comments, as usual, struck a balance between urgency and gentleness. I answered, "Yes, wait a moment," and quickly stood up, straightening my clothes and forgetting I wasn't wearing underwear as I walked down to the living room. Anne's image immediately drew my attention. She was dressed in a tight t-shirt that highlighted her slim waist and short shorts that revealed her long white legs. Each of those perfect lines made my mind numb for a moment. The thoughts I had just tried to push back came rushing back like a raging wave, a strange sensation. rose in my heart was a mixture of admiration and confusion that I couldn't understand. I tried to remain cool and ignore the emotions that were coursing through me as I approached her, but my body reacted against my will. I could feel my tiny man becoming erect, and to make matters worse, I had completely forgotten I wasn't wearing underwear. My entire body appeared to betray my mind, putting me in an unpleasant and uncontrollable situation, and burst out laughing, her voice echoing loudly around the silent hall. She looked at me, her eyes full of something difficult to express. I couldn't understand what she was laughing about. "What's wrong? Is anything funny?" I said, trying to hide my surprise, but she only laughed harder, to the point where she had to turn away to avoid looking straight at me. "John, going out like this isn't good for you," she said, covering her mouth and trying not to laugh. I had no idea what was going on, standing there like a statue in the middle of the living room as she chuckled. I asked, "What's wrong? Had I done anything funny?" But she shook her head, attempting to conceal her humiliation. "No, it's nothing. Go upstairs." "I'll go alone," she said, her voice hesitant and serious, striving to conceal something. I stood there looking at her, bewildered. Why did she want me to join her at first? Just to instruct her to go alone? I was skeptical, but I wasn't sure what else to ask. I returned to the room with a jumble of thoughts. As I passed the mirror, my eyes paused, and I realized what had made her laugh. I wasn't wearing underpants, and my son had been raising his flag for a while. My face burned from shame. I stood paralyzed, humiliated, and unsure of what to do. Her laughter still echoed in my head. Didn't realize it? She obviously did. Otherwise, she wouldn't have laughed so loudly. But why didn't she say it directly? Why did she meekly ask me to leave? As I returned to the room, a series of queries surfaced, making my heart accelerate. Was she just laughing at the humorous situation, or did she have something more in mind? I lay down on the bed, hands covering my face, hoping to ignore the bad feeling. But the vision of Anne, her laughter, and that strange disorientation persisted. I wondered if she thought of me in the same way I thought of her, or if my self-doubt was just a coincidence. My heart was filled with regret, but there was also a spark of hope, and when I returned home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I was still embarrassed by what had just happened, and while I wasn't sure, I almost believed she had seen something that made her laugh earlier. The more I thought about it, the more my face burned, as if I had been caught doing something wrong. Nonetheless, I urged myself to stay calm and act as if nothing had happened. I decided to go down to the kitchen with my sister and prepare dinner, trying to replicate our normal attitude. As soon as I walked in, I spoke out as usual. "Your back is there. Are there a lot of people in the market?" And didn't turn around. She just answered neatly, "It's fine, but it's a bit crowded. Come in and help me." I nodded and walked over to where she was washing the vegetables. I sat down and started breaking each branch of vegetable for her to prepare to boil. The space was quiet, only the sound of water flowing from the sink faucet, but inside me the tension was still simmering. I didn't know if she really noticed what happened just now, or if I was just making things complicated. I thought if I didn't mention it again, everything would pass, but right at that moment her voice rang out, making me stiffen. "Are you done yet?" I was stunned. Her words were like a blow to my already unstable mind. Even though I understood what she was implying, I didn't have the courage to face it. My whole body froze, not knowing how to react. My heart was pounding, but I still tried to pretend I didn't understand what she meant. "Oh," I finished breaking it. "It should be okay, right?" She turned to look at me, her eyes mischievous and unpredictable. She smiled and nodded slightly. "Well, if you're done, leave it there. I can continue." Her voice sounded very normal, but I felt something strange in her words, a little joking, a little playful, but it made me feel extremely embarrassed. I didn't say anything more, just nodded and stood up, then let me go upstairs. "You continue. I'm a little tired," and smiled slightly and said nothing more. I quietly left the kitchen, trying to walk naturally, but my heart was in turmoil. When I got back to my room, I collapsed on the bed, feeling ashamed and embarrassed. Her question kept echoing in my head, and I kept wondering if she really knew what I was thinking. I lay down on the bed, covering my face with my hands, feeling both confused and helpless. I need to control myself. This is my sister, and is my sister. I repeated it as a reminder, but the image of her in the kitchen, her smile, and her teasing voice still clung to me. Unable to escape that night after the family had finished dinner, I returned to my room to clean up some of the clutter in the corner of my desk. It was so quiet that only the sound of insects chirping outside the window could be heard. I was busy putting away my books when I heard a light knock on the door. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice somewhat curious. "It's Esme." Anne's voice echoed in soft and familiar tones. "Would you mind helping me with something?" I quickly replied, "No problem. What do you require?" As I spoke, I approached and opened the door. Anne was in front of me, but the first thing I noticed was her pajamas. It was a light blue silk nightgown, delicate yet appealing to her flawless white skin. The dress featured a deep V-neck, revealing some of her collarbone and narrow shoulders. My heart skipped a beat, but I attempted to maintain a cool expression. She grinned as she entered the room, clutching her phone. "Something is wrong with my phone. I'm not sure why it crashes every time I open the program. I tried restarting it, but it didn't work. Can you help me?" I nodded and took the phone from her. "Let me try. It's most likely just a software issue, such as an app conflict or an operating system upgrade," and stood there as natural as always. Yet her presence in this small area, especially in her pajamas, confused me. I looked down at my phone and started checking the settings. As expected, her operating system was out of date and incompatible with the application's current version. I explained that your phone needs an operating system upgrade. "Let me download the new update. Reinstall it, and it will be fine." "Oh, really? Thank goodness." "I was afraid it was broken," she said, her voice soft and relaxed as I bent down, struggling to download. The update, I felt her gaze. I reflexively glanced at her from the corner of my eye. She wasn't looking at the phone or what I was doing, but her eyes were looking down at me. And then suddenly, she smiled an unreadable smile that I couldn't understand. I paused, trying not to show my embarrassment, but inside my confusion had increased exponentially. I knew that look, knew what she had just seen, but didn't dare to face it or say it. I was able to reinstall it, I stammered, trying to break the awkward atmosphere. "Oh, that fast?" "Thanks," she replied, still keeping a slight smile on her lips. She took the phone back from me, her eyes glancing briefly at my face as if to gauge my reaction. "It's nothing. It's just a small mistake," I replied, trying to appear calm, but deep down I knew that calmness was just a facade. Her looks and subtle movements today elicited a flood of emotions that I battled to control. After returning Anne's phone and assuming everything was finished, I prepared to stand up to see her leave the room. But before I could say anything, she turned back, leaning in that I asked, "There's something wrong?" of the table, and asked, softly but meaningfully, "Do I look beautiful?" "John," the unexpected question made me wonder how to answer. I awkwardly smiled, trying to find a way to distract him. "It's beautiful, isn't it? But why are you suddenly asking that? Is something wrong?" "And SM, that's why you saluted." Her words were like a thunderbolt. I felt all the blood rush to my face, my heart pounding, and my whole body was confused and didn't know what to do. I quickly shook my head and denied it immediately. "No, it's not like that. What are you thinking?" But her eyes still didn't leave me. Her slight smile made me even more embarrassed. She moved closer step by step, making me feel like this small room was shrinking. I stepped back, trying to keep my distance, but then she suddenly lunged forward, her two hands holding my shoulders, her face only a few centimeters away from mine. "John, what are you afraid of? We're both adults. I know what you're thinking. I've seen it all." I turned away, not daring to look at her. "And what are you talking about?" "Stop joking. It's not funny," but she didn't stop. She moved closer and closer. I could feel her warm breath on my neck, which made me more nervous than ever. "John, why are you avoiding me? I know you want me to." Anna's voice was soft, but her words were like a knife piercing my mind. The air seemed to thicken, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to escape my chest. "Don't say it," I said, my voice trembling but strong enough to stop the growing danger. I stepped back, creating distance between us, my eyes tensely looking straight at her. "Do you know what you're saying?" This is wrong. And you're my sister. Her eyes flashed with pain for a minute. She moved forward, her voice low and almost begging. John, stop lying to yourself. I can see everything in your eyes. You do not need to hide or fake your emotions. I felt my entire body freeze, but my mind was powerful enough to resist. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm in the midst of my confusion and anxiety. No, you're wrong. I don't think like that. I don't want that. We are brothers. We are family. She halted, her face full of misery and guilt. Her eyes searched mine for a signal to continue, but I remained focused, determined not to let her go any further. Finally, she averted her gaze, as if she did not dare to confront the truth. Her voice lowered to a sorrowful whisper. I'm sorry. I'm not sure why I'm like this. Maybe I should go back to my room. She turned away. Each slow stride seemed to drag the unpleasant atmosphere that remained in the room after the door was closed. I collapsed on the bed, feeling as if I'd just escaped a big hurricane. My mind was in complete pandemonium, with no way out. Anne's remarks kept repeating in my mind, and each term and word seemed to penetrate deep into my soul. She said I didn't have to pretend to want her. Those statements appeared to betray the feelings I had tried to suppress. Even I was reluctant to admit she was correct. I couldn't deny that after several seemingly unintentional encounters, I had bad sentiments about her, but my reason was strong enough to remind me that she was my sister, and we could never cross that line. I recognized how dangerous this situation was. Her every word and action tonight had demolished the fragile barrier between us. If I didn't stay rational, if I let myself go even once, everything would fall apart. Beyond repair, I sat in the empty room, my heart pounding with sorrow. I wasn't sure who to blame, her or myself, for letting things get this far. That night, I was unable to sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the black ceiling, reflecting on what had happened in just one day. My relationship with her had shifted tremendously. I remembered her eyes, her smile, and the conflicting hidden words. She was the person I had always admired and felt was closest to me. But now everything was so complicated that I couldn't face the notion of what would happen tomorrow. If I stayed here, would I eventually lose control of myself? I discovered that no matter how strong human emotions are, they cannot overcome temptation if allowed to continue. And was too close, too familiar, and too terrifying. I was worried that if I didn't create distance, all boundaries would be completely dissolved. After a long night of thinking, I decided to do something courageous. I realized there was just one way. To keep myself and Anne from making an irreversible mistake, I had to leave. I needed to get away and give myself enough space to avoid these emotions from arising. This was not only the solution to the current situation, but also the only way to protect our valuable family ties. The next morning, as the family was eating breakfast, I decided to inform them of my intentions. My tone was serious but perplexed. Mom and Dad, I suppose I'm going to move out. My father set down his teacup and peered at me with surprise. Why do you suddenly want to go out? You are still young. Wouldn't it be more convenient to stay at home? Is something wrong? My mother also looked at me, her eyes anxious. Is there something wrong, John? Or do you feel uneasy at home? Please tell us. Don't be shy. I tried to smile to persuade my parents, despite my own conflicting emotions. No, Mom and Dad, I just feel like I've grown up and need to be more independent. I believe that getting out will help me learn to handle myself and prepare me better for the future. My father scowled, as if he were thinking hard, but eventually nodded. If you have made this decision, we will respect it. Nevertheless, if you experience any difficulties, please notify us immediately. You can always return to your home. He turned to my mother, who seemed concerned but did not object. You need to take good care of yourself. Do you need assistance choosing a house, moving belongings, or anything else? I knew this was the best decision for Anne and myself. I needed time and space to process these emotions in order to be myself again and keep the family together after all I had been through. I learned an important lesson. Emotions are challenging to manage, but not impossible. Moments of weakness can enable us to become swept up in hazy emotions. easily crossing the line of morality and family connections. Yet, being conscious of right and wrong and keeping sensible are key aspects in preventing permanent mistakes. I believe that sharing your feelings is not wrong, but understanding how to set proper limits is sometimes important. Distance was built not to flee, but to protect more essential ideas: love, respect, and self-esteem. The most significant lesson I learned is that courage is not only about facing problems, but also about knowing when to walk away in order to save the finest things. The decision to leave a dangerous situation is not a sign of weakness, but rather a necessary one. To keep yourself and those around you from being harmed by the story, I have some advice for everyone. In life, we cannot avoid unforeseen events that trigger uncontrollable emotions. These emotions, whether momentary or long-lasting, might lead to mistakes if we don't know how to handle them properly. As a result, my advice is to always be smart and aware of boundaries in all interactions. When you find yourself caught up in an uncontrollable emotional spiral, pause and ask yourself, is this emotion worth sacrificing for precious possessions? Mindfulness and self-reflection can help you recognize how acting on your emotions can jeopardize values you care about, such as familial bonds, honor, or self-esteem. If you are having trouble restraining yourself, do not be afraid to remove yourself or seek assistance from family, friends, or a mental health professional. Avoidance is not a sign of weakness, but rather a tactic for protecting yourself from more serious damage. Remember that the decisions you make today can affect both your own and others' futures. Maintaining boundaries and adhering to your views and principles is the most effective way to live a peaceful and happy life. My story ends here. Thank you for hearing my story. See you in the following videos.